Hello. I've been going through these videos on various topics that relate to English literature, to UGC net and such other exams in India, and I'd like to today take something that I've mentioned before, something that is there in these slides, not directly, if not directly, it is indeed there, and we've come across this kind of thing before. This is the third time I'm mentioning this. It is in this series. There's MSc in Digital Humanities. So again, which is science and which arts? So that's a question that's been around for some time now. Only some time ago, I mean, today I came across this University UN rankings note PDF. I don't know. That's what's been going on. I think it is AIU. So, what effects do rankings have on visas? That's what it says. So, that's one of the things that it says here. You can read it for yourself, and you want to read this as well. So, critiques that are advised to be followed by universities, governments, on in this note on this is very much related to what I said, what I've been saying, and what we are going to discuss today. This is very much related to science versus arts and interdisciplinary and so on. So, we'll cover this some other day. But yes, getting back to today's topic, science or science and religion and English literature, or English literature and science and religion. So, I mean, there's of the levels changing rural landscape because of technological developments. That's what I'm reminded of. There are certainly books that have been material that talks about these things and so on. So, nature and modernity theme in Tales of the Dolls, you can see that there, and shifting pattern of rural life, right? So, let's focus on this. English literature and science and religion. So the other day I mentioned, for example, that there's ongoing research that says these are the effects of beliefs acquired during this time or developed during this time in one's life on how, for example, things are thought about by this individual. That is, I mean, of beliefs on later life psychological experiment paper research. That's recent research, okay? See, belief bias effect in older adults. Belief in no, that's different. Life after death is different. That kind of thing, yes. So influence of beliefs on cognition, that how does religious belief? So, point I'm trying to make is the other day I mentioned, for example, they're taking over, and this was in relation to AI. So I've been saying that you can just stick AI with everything and have something to talk about. And we want to find out today. We want to find out if there is something that has English literature and science and religion. Science and religion, Jekyll and Hyde. Okay. Science and religion in Western literature. Lewis is one name. Another name that comes up. Religious studies and English literature. Carroll, Lewis Carroll. Okay. Influence of religion on English literature. That's PDF slides. Okay. You see, there are a few names that come up, and I would want to. Yeah, I can't see anything that answers my question, but point being, could just go for. Yes, we'll have a look at that later. But the thing is, you have a few names here: Jekyll and Hyde, and then Carroll and C.S. Lewis and things like that. So you have things like C.S. Lewis's Narnia and stuff like that, and we can have a look at these things, of course. Okay. Bacon, Boyle, Moore, Conway. Names associated with religion, science, in the early modern period. Okay. Theories about the relationship between religion and science arose out of a self-conscious response to other voices and were informed by exchange of ideas and open-ended debate. So, as you can see, this is very much there in English literature, so to speak. and Boyle, who's Robert Boyle, and Henry Moore, and Anne Conway. I know Francis Bacon, and Francis Bacon I've already mentioned. Science starts with Bacon and so on. So that's one. Science and religion, 19th century. How is that related to English literature? Yeah. So Darwin, theory, and English literature. So I was going through these opponents of Darwin's theory of evolution. You can read something like this. Darwin stopped an argument against his own theory, right? And you want to know this. You have to, be able to, if you want to see how things are evolving. For example, is AI the next step in the theory of evolution? And as I've been saying, is curiosity in AI being forced, or coming, or is there naturally, that kind of thing. So curiosity in AI is being forced, or is it there, or you're showing that it is there? Is curiosity in AI there, or being, whichever verbs you like, there? Okay, that's the kind of thing. So compare take these things together and talk about it, right? Opponents of Darwin's theory and opponents of theory of evolution, opponents of Darwin. That's what you want to look at, and I will turn back to English literature and Darwin's theory, Darwinism in literature. John Holmes, University of Reading. Darwin's theory of evolution in the intellectual. Victorian web. You see, we come across Victorian web once again. So that tells us that this is going to be of use for us if we want to specifically, if we want to look at these particular topics. And you can see that Victorian era is something that has all of these things. This is happening as I go about it. I have not planned these any of these videos, for that matter, and it's all extempore. And you can see that what I'm talking about is getting back to the Victorian era, for example. This has come across, I've come across this the third time, I guess, in these 16 videos. This is these 15 videos, 15, 16 videos, yeah. And of course, if it's Darwin, it has to be Victorian era, so it's nothing, special about it. But why I'm saying this is Darwin, and I think it is this. Yes. So that's, this was 20, 20 something. So how we learn this on Darwin. Yes, the other day I talked about neural recycling, for example. Yeah, the brain is a Darwin machine, and this is where, I mean, this is one thing I can point you to. But again, getting back to English literature, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution in the intellectual ferment of the mid and late Victorian periods. Evolutionary narrative in Darwin, George Eliot, and 19th century fiction. That's what you want to look at. Okay. Literary Darwinism. There's a whole, yeah, okay, book on the phrase, right? Literary Darwinism, evolution, human nature, and literature. So you can see that there is one area. I mean, I'm not talking about science fiction per se, but you can see that this is where it's going. And then we're talking about religion. That is not, I mean, that's something that's not covered here. And I've already talked about psychology and religion, Darwin's literary models. Things were different in Darwin's day. Styles of writing. Okay, fine. Darwin and literature. The Darwin series took literary form, but they've also changed what literature means in ways we are still working to understand. In ways we are still working to understand. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. That, by the way, reminds me, Joyce boasted that generations of scholars will research Wake or Ulysses, that kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. So, for example, there's an essay, and the introduction to this essay reads that Joyce was once, at least once, known to say that generations of scholars will spend a lot of time, or whatever the quote was. I don't have the exact words in my mind, but they'll spend so much time, generations of these people, they'll spend so much time on researching what these books are. So, Finnegan's Wake and Ulysses, I guess it's for Finnegan's Wake, and I think both. Yeah. As you can see, you have it here. What is the source of JJ's quote about keeping the professors busy for centuries? Yeah. So there's a paywall. I cannot access it, and you can see that there is discussion on this, and you can find out more about it if you wanted. I have pointed you to this. So that's it. Coming back to science, religion, and English literature, I'm gonna find out war. I would religion in the Victorian era, BBC. Okay, I mean, that's for a particular purpose, not BBC, just BBC, English literature and religion. You can see that, right? So what I'm trying is, the importance of early modern natural philosophy to be construction to the construction of science and religion. Debate cannot. Okay, inside the new directions, religion and literature series, glimpses of religion in literature. Okay, in English literature, science and religion in the writings of. Okay, we've come across this. The Canterbury Tales by Chaucer is another superb example of influence of religion in literature. Okay, English literature. Okay. Okay. Um, you can see that we have pairs, but we don't have the three things there, right? Question is, how does science and how to status quo science and religion in the 21st century? Yeah, there are books on it and everything. So SSRN, I will not go in that direction, but you can see there is something about. So, for example, there's so much one could talk about, and I will not. I will focus on things I would like you to think about. So, science and religion in the 21st century, and science and religion. Okay, fine. Lots of things here. 21st century even debate. Okay, debate on science and religion and new religious movements and dramatic. Okay, yeah, that's 1910. You can see that there is a discussion between the two. Um, yeah, at least two people there. I don't know. I have not seen this, but this is from 1 year ago. Science and religion meets new culture. Contemplative research. What's contemplative research? New paradigm for science and religion. See, the scientific community has largely shown a greater allegiance to materialist dogmas than to empirical evidence that might challenge invested beliefs. That's what this page has to say. Empirical evidence that might challenge invested belief. Again, empirical evidence depends on, one has to argue, one empirical evidence has depends on material existence and manifestation of is sought after. Okay, or what is looked for, or you get my point, right? What is searched, right? So, for example, empirical evidence that Chaucer in his general prologue is justified in critiquing the practices then current, like indulgences, for example. Okay, what I'm saying is, you, I assume, have read this poem. How much ever part of it, it's a big collection of various tales, and at least general prologue, it's customary, it's traditional to memorize the eating lines of the first eating lines of the general prologue and so on and so forth. I know that from my studies over the years. Again, customary, traditional. Let's get into this. Bones. Yeah. So he had a cross of laton full of stones, and in a glass he had pig's bones. So he had a cross of latin brass-like alloy covered with stones, and in a glass container he had pig's bones. So that kind of thing. Okay. I came here because I wanted to show you that it is there in the poem. Okay, that is just one example. Empirical evidence that Chaucer in his general prologue is justified in critiquing the practice then current, like indulgences. Indulgence, you might know what indulgence is if you know anything about Christianity, if you know anything about medieval times and Christianity and so on and so forth. So that's what I said. I mean, that's what I said in response to this. The scientific community has largely shown a greater allegiance to materialist dogmas than to empirical evidence that might challenge invested beliefs, and I came up with this. Okay, now I'll just save it somewhere. Right. Coming back to what we were talking about, you can see that I had to shift to something else, English literature, and let's check. In Victorian fiction, again, you see literature and religion, and again, and literature. When you study the history of English literature, you talk about. So there is this book. I know the book. If I have to give away all the books I've read, and which is okay. Um, English drama origins in the church, Parvis. Then there was pageants later on, roles played by the clergy, and so on, etc. English drama had a distinctly religious origin. The first English plays were called mysteries. They represent scenes from the life of Christ, and yes, so you can see that. Let's see. This again, this is getting into. So in 2000, so I wrote that if stats were any measure, anyone from today might be Shakespeare's of tomorrow. That kind of thing. So popularity, if popularity were a measure, and you were counting every website visit, duplicates included, excluded, depending, etc. So that is what this rankings, university rankings, again criticized for being opaque. Okay, so that is that is recent. That's where I started. So that's one example. So that's the thing with statistics, and in the background is empiricism. Okay, that's I hope you can connect the dots. I wrote this in 2000 and so. I will provide evidence if your if your curiosity, I mean, extends to that. um, but anyway, as you can see, this is very much a, I mean, basis of at least this article or published work, or essay, whatever it is, chapter, book chapter, and so on. So much of the main repertoire is accessible on the shelves of libraries and bookshops. Civic and county archives are being scrutinized for practical details of local organization and preservation. Periodicals and volumes replete with the complete accompanying theories that are not frequently. That's what I'm saying. This is again non-fungible tokens and words. I have said this. I'm saying it again. Okay. So I'll just that's from me. So that reminds me. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's what I mean. Yeah, that is CF IAU UN and University rankings, which I started with today. So, for example, CF, for example, okay. Point being, who accounts for the math? That's what I asked, and that's what I'm repeating. Okay. So, coming back to this, you could talk about, if you want to talk about this, you could talk about the two professors compared in this film, which had this detail and that. Guess the film. My dear AI. Okay, so the mirror has to. Okay. Okay. Dive deeper in AI mode. Okay. Tenure, and then the mirror has two faces. Are two candidates here, but I'm not giving you the film. The other day I talked about this scene from Schindler's List, right? I'm not giving you the film, but as you can see, AI has something for you here as well. Let's change it to, will the humanities survive artificial intelligence? It's a very much germane or relevant question. Yeah, accept everything, read terms and conditions for every website that you visit and find out the details and partners and so on and so forth. So much reading that you'd spend quite a lot of time reading that, just reading that. Okay. Anyway, in the ruins of the old curriculum, something vital is stirring. Okay, so that would be a useful read. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's leave it here. I'm not giving you the film. Sorry. Some other day, some other time, probably. The influence of religion on English literature, science and religion in the 20th and in the 19th century. Okay. Introduction to religion and literature. you can see that these results are coming up in the search. So it has all of these have signs there. So it's definitely the case that there is talk of science wherever there is talk of religion. They are a university. They are advertisements. I don't want advertisements. Yeah, just advertisements. Lots of them advertisements. Yeah. So you would say religion, literature, and the academy. Science and religion. Conflict between religion and science. That's 1985, and it would be called ancient today, given the pace that AI is moving. Anyway, um, yeah, you can find out more here. Moving on. Modern literature and science. 1964. That's too old. Too old. The Victorian conflict between science and religion and professional dimension. The Victorian conflict. Okay, so you can see one of the things that you can see is that one founthead or one source is Victorian literature. Victorian literature. That, by the way, reminds me Shelley and literary theory. Also, Coleridge and literary theory. You can see that one source of so if you read about the Victorian period, you'll find out a lot of things, things that have origins that are due to this period and today's time. So that is a history of how ideas came up, concepts came up, things came up, how materialism has affected how things have changed, and so on. So, for example, in Shakespeare's time, how the how town planning was, and these are things that you study when you study about when you study secondary sources. Okay, so from Shakespeare's time, okay, that's it's very different, and from Victorian times, it's closer. That's why I'm talking about Victorian times, and it would be of great use to go through how those things, how developments in those times have affected. For example, and the last 200 years of the British Raj in India and reign of wealth, wealth and post 1947 developments and literature, English. I know that this is. I mean, is there anything common? So that is detective work. That is detective work. Compare questions like find the film given these details and find the scene given these details, right? Again, I can tell you that with a machine it's very much possible to do these things. By machine I mean these AI agents or whatever it is. And the Raj India, what it is doing is simply finding stuff so that it can show you something and sell, among other things. So I'm not going into that, but the point is, during Victorian era, maximum, how should I put it, happened in terms of economic in India by the rulers. So that kind of thing. Yeah, that is the topic. Okay. That is what this source says, and other sources will say other things. They'll corroborate, they'll oppose, and that's how it's going to go. And I'll leave it there. But that is certainly, these are areas you can, I mean, research in British rule India, and that is where, for example, that is where it it is probably collected connected to, or Shakespeare, let's say. How Shakespeare's works were used as a tool by the British colonial government to inculcate sense of British superiority. Okay, that's a first. I'm thankful to you for the fact that I've discovered this thing today. But yes, you can see that these are topics, and you could take it further from here. You could work on this, and maybe there are things that you would like to refute or find out more about in this thesis, dissertation, whatever it is. But study of Shakespeare performance in colonial Calcutta. Now, the thing with Calcutta is you have to be very, yeah, I'll leave it there. Alumni voices. Shakespeare's gone from colonial poet. I'll give you one name. Okay, this is from 2000 something something, and is written about Shakespeare. So, is it JSTOR? Politics of culturalisms in an age of globalization. A reply to Rustam Barocha. Um, Disorientations in the cultural. So disorientations, that reminds me, post-modernist slippage. Okay, so anyway, yeah, and end of the golden age in the early 20th century English literature. Okay, so you will read this when you read about English literature and coming of First World War and English literature. So, for example, that reminds me. That reminds me. Okay, so yeah, getting back to this. Notes on the invention of tradition, some Western interpretations of the Indian theatre. Yes, that is. I mean, that is very much a topic you'd be interested in. For example, Kalidas and Shakespeare compared, or Kalidas and compared. That is what I had in 2000 something something. So again, we'll have a look at this. Love in the Times of Shakespeare and Kalidas. You can see this is coming on its own. I am not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's because I searched that specifically. Sorry. Influence of Kalidas on Shakespeare. I thought it was because of some other. It's a Barucha. It was related to Barucha. So anyway, Kalidas, India, Shakespeare, or something more. So you can see that there have been comparisons and there is ongoing stuff on this. And let's get back to this. Collision of culture, some Western interpretations of the Indian theatre in the name of the secular. Okay, okay, and that would be so. For example, this one. That is one of the things I came across in 2000 something something, and that is what I can pass on to you. Themes and issues. Intraculturalist was coined by Rustam Barocha, not so much as a retort to the postmodern aestheticism. This would be of use. That would be of use indeed. So I am going to focus on as you can see, I got it as part of the extract from the page, but I cannot access it here because it's behind a paywall. Okay, yeah, it's behind a paywall. So intraculturalist and okay, interculturalism. It shows interculturalism, but not that. I'll try again. Okay, yeah, doesn't show me anything. You can see that this is very much a part of what's going on at the moment. Girish Karnad, and if you're interested, you can go ahead. I will leave it at that. Epic imagination in performance studies. Performance studies. Yeah, let's not get into that's theatre. Okay, decoding Shakespeare in the Indian context. Um, Foreign Asia Shakespeare. That's That is something I would recommend you to read. Decolonize two monolithic entities, Asia and Shakespeare, in their ideational and performative contexts through an examination of their potentially conflictual relationships, Asia and Shakespeare, Shakespeare and Asia, Asia without Shakespeare, and Shakespeare without Asia, Shakespeare without Shakespeare, okay, among other permutations or combinations of complex cultural dynamic. That's what I'm saying. Permutations and combinations is what you pick it up, what you pick up, because permutations and combinations leads to, again, the question, as a way to trick the brain used in neuromarketing. I came across the term in the morning on LinkedIn, if you want the source as well. So, neuromarketing, okay? Machines learn neuromarketing, right? Neural correlates with non-optimal price, MEG, EEG, okay? Utilization of brain connectivity in classic, okay? Event-related potentials, okay? One takeaway for today is neuromarketing, and as you can see, I can't find anything directly related to this, but that's what I'm saying. I have already said that this kind of thing helps advertising. That's what advertising is based on, by the way. One of the things that's maths that they utilize to make sure you buy this product or that, or you get attracted to this first or that, and so on and so forth. Attracted as in, when you're going shopping, you're looking at so many things and you want to have very good sense of what to buy and when to buy and how to buy it, and so on and so forth. So it's been there for so long. You would have a history of art of buying history. There would be some group who has done a lot of study on this. And okay, no, see, that's an example of ambiguity. This is evidence based. I mean, so, example, evidence of evidence for learning something about ambiguity in language, right? Anyway, let's not go into any of that. Art of computer programming, art of buying, and this gives me art market. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, so that's the search engine optimization, and that's the search engine, so on and so forth. Art of buying. There is a book named that. Okay, hidden power of purchase history. Okay, that's getting into something else. Of course, it is connected with that, but brief history of the art market is not what I want. Art dealing and all sorts of things that we don't want here. So history of consumerism behavior, let's say, that kind of thing, okay. Looking it from the other side, okay. Consumer research, consumer culture, brief history of consumer culture, that would be a good read. Brief history of consumer culture, not because I see a label there. This is not because I see a label there. You will observe consistency in how I've been pointing out what's useful. I have not been saying anything about anything else, but yes, I have been pointing out what's useful, what might be useful reading, or maybe it serves to just illustrate my own interests. But there is, I mean, kind of to use the cliche, method to madness. Method to madness, by the way, should remind you of Hamlet, the scene and the act, if possible. If you are diligent enough, you will remember the act and the scene as well. Madness, Hamlet, which scene and act, that kind of thing. Again, you will have all of this if you read Hamlet for read as in study Hamlet over 6 months time or so on. So that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be the case that you remember everything from Hamlet. So which in turn reminds me, King Lear based last year Amitabh. Okay, so there's a scene, for example, in which this journalist character says that he was expecting me to remember Shakespeare and so on and so forth. And so That is about things that I don't want to get into, among other things. So I'll leave it at that. But journalist, um, pulled off by Bachchan, the last year, starting scenes. Okay. The other day I was searching for starting scenes and I came across this um, idea that there is a range and where does the range begin and end and so on. So of course it begins at the first scene, then where does it end? So fuzzy logic is what it is called. Okay, fuzzy logic is a comparing approach based on degrees of truth rather than the strict values for 1 or 0 and so on. There is a scene in which these characters discuss, characters played by these people discuss, which is what you understand. Of course, I don't have to explain that, but a lot of languages like that. And the journalist doesn't feel very good about the whole thing, but yes, it would be a good idea to read Shakespeare if you were get into journalism. I think it is there is merit in the idea. Okay, yeah, great. So method to madness, which act and scene. Yeah, so act 2 scene 2, that's what AI says. And see why I go for this label. I go for this label because it's complete text in the simplest format there is. So I don't want HTML, for example, right? So method to there's a method in it, right? So art of computer programming, there's a book. I know a different cover. You see this person has interviewed Nath. Nath is related with C, right? Yeah. Yes. No. He did not. He's definitely connected with C, but he did not develop C. Sure. Getting back to, I know a different cover, red edition, which okay might be this. Anyway, point is, yeah, I have known this book. I've had the fortune of coming across this book. I don't know where, when. I mean, of course, I can tell you where and when, but yes, yeah. So, history of consumer behavior. I started by I went off that tangent because of this. Okay, so this is what you're looking at, and this very much a great entry point into Shakespeare as it is being studied today, for sure. Okay, so let's get back. Coleridge and literary theory. You have to that is staple. Okay, staple. Okay. Shelley and literary theory. So defense of poetry and Coleridge's essays on in literary criticism. That's standard syllabus. Okay, so where you have literary criticism and then where the switch to theory happens. So the political theoretic approach to the study of literary criticism morphing into literary theory. Okay, so an essay on okay on the yeah. So the other day the other day I talked about political theory, reading political theory, right? So anyway, the politics of literary theory. Nice, nice. So you see how the mind works. So that reminds me, the mind and the devil and devil speed and God speed. Okay, what's me and the devil? You don't want to look at me and the devil. Sorry. Yeah. No, not me. I don't know what that is, but yeah, don't search for such things. Okay, don't search for such thing. I cannot, I mean, I cannot recommend that kind of, I cannot endorse that kind of thing. The politics of literary theory, Robert Young. I don't know who that is, what that is about, this is about. And the journal is Oxford Literary Review. Yeah. Okay, again, I have to remind you, AU AIU, and I'll leave it there. Okay, I'll just say that and leave it there. So the other day I talked about philosophy of philosophy, right? So you can see that construction here, the politics of literary theory. Now, this is a response to something, the politics of literary theory being in quotes, and let's find out if it is something. Politics of literary theory. Yes, introduction to Marxist, and yeah. Let's not get into political debates. Let's put it like that. Okay. Marxist criticism. Yeah, introduction to Marxist criticism. Yes, so that's why I'll just leave it there. But the politics of literary theory, Robert Young. If you would like to read it, go ahead. You're you're encouraged, highly encouraged. Okay, meta philosophy. You can see that is there. Meta philosophy. Okay, let's actually have a look. Fill papers. Then you do have it here as well. Journal published by Blackwell, SEP, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Suber, a personal list. You see that I'm looking at these things because I looked at these things to ensure consilience. The word is consilience. Okay. Yeah, great. There is something that's called meta philosophy, and let's not get into that right now. So Coleridge and Shelley are things that you have to read. I would recommend Ancient Mariner anytime. Okay, so Ancient Mariner is something that you absolutely have to read. So anyway, I mean, you can't do English literature without reading Ancient Mariner sort of thing. Okay, so yeah, this is searching for Fountainhead and Fountain got stuck there. But I think I've suggested you a lot of themes, research topics, and a lot of new ideas, relatively new ideas. I mean, in the context of these 15 videos, there are new ideas. Okay, so you can see a lot of this coming from Victorian conflict. So Victorian politics and English literature. That would be another great who backed Dickens. That is a very good research topic. That is a very good line of inquiry, because what makes good literature come into being? That's the question, right? That's the question. And by the way, what is good literature? Okay, the good life, right? so what do you subscribe to? What do you subscribe to? Do you subscribe to Epictetus, or do you subscribe to Zeno, or what is it that you subscribe to? So anyway, Anyway, getting back to, by the way, the good life is an allusion to Aristotle. If you, I mean, okay, it's, that reminds me something. That reminds me something from non XX, and it is a Greek word. It says, I don't know. Yes, precisely. So this is from years ago, and that is one reason you would want to read philosophy. This is a literature and philosophy as it relates to Plato and Aristotle. Yeah. So this is where we'll stop today, and I don't know what this is. Okay, the great Dickens and Dostoevsky have a hoax and lots of things to study there, but literary friends, that's what you want to look at. Okay, literary friends, that's another thing that you want to look at. So Scribner's Club, that was Pope and his central. Correct. And Swift Swift was part of which literary circles? Yeah, this is standard history of English literature. Okay, I'm not giving you any more than that. I mean, let me make it very clear. AI will have something to say about good literature. Okay, so um, anyway, that's it for this one, and we'll continue talking about this in upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. Thanks for your time. Stay tuned.